He called me about a year ago about this TED talk, and I said, I've never done a TED. And he said, yeah, but maybe you should show up. And then I said, what am I going to say? I'm a 55-year-old guy. I mean, there's a lot of young people sitting here, age of my kids, and you know, when you have kids in your early 20s, they not always want to listen what the old guy has to say. So it was kind of a situation how to deal with this. And then we came up with something I know about, which is dealing with crisis. Because crises come over time. Crises come as a course of life. And I think we've heard really great talks today. And all these talks look forward. All these talks give you energy to do what you think you should be doing. And I'm going to talk about something very different right now. I'm going to talk about how to deal with the shadow, with crisis. And with crisis, I mean real crisis. I don't mean, oh my God, she looked at me in a bad way or something like that. I'm talking about real crisis. And with real crisis, I want to use, or in my talk, I want to use two examples from my life, and I want to follow basically what I would call the dynamics of a crisis. Because when I was in my 20s, I would have loved if somebody had told me many crises have the same DNA. So once you know a little bit about the, let's call it the script of a crisis, life becomes easier. And the two examples I will use is one is a professional example, one is an example out of my private life. The example out of my private life is the suicide of my mother in my children's room, in my children's bed, which obviously is a crisis. The second example I'm going to use is my wife's here today. She was our CEO, so we're very gender-driven on this. We had a company until recently, and a couple of years ago, we were very proud to work for Rolls-Royce. It was an automotive supply company. And the guys in the middle, that is to say, the suppliers to Rolls-Royce, went bankrupt. And within a couple of days, our entire economic base was destroyed, which I also consider to be a crisis. All right, let's get started. How to deal with a crisis? First of all, what is a crisis? I think we should distinguish between trouble and crisis. Crisis is what rocks the boat. Or to put it in American terms, when the shit really hits the fan. All right? You can see that coming at you. Crisis. The shit hits the fan. And crisis means your life is no longer the way you thought it was going to be. Your life is no longer true to the beliefs, in German we say Glaubenssätze, to what you really fundamentally believe. It rocks you, it shakes you. And when that happens, you have shock, you have fear, horror, uncertainty, confusion, paralysis. I mean, really tough stuff. So the first idea I want to share with you is if a situation happens, make sure you're dealing with a crisis and make sure it is not trouble. 98% of things are trouble. Even failing an exam at this beautiful university is trouble. Trust me, life continues. Why do I know this? I failed exams. Yeah, it's character building. That's the way I look at it today. I like it that you get that one. That's a good one. So if we take out those 98% and we really focus on the big stuff, suddenly the word crisis has a different meaning. Because the word crisis also becomes a matter of perspective. And I'm going to show you different types of perspectives right now. The first question, and this sounds really strange, is it a reality or is it an expectation? Reality means it's there. It has happened. Like the moment I got the call from somebody, your mom is dead. That's a reality. But many times we look at situations and we perceive them as a crisis, but it is not so much a crisis at this point, it is an expectation. And that is a critical point. Why? I'm a great fan of the philosopher Seneca, who is a Roman guy who actually was the Bill Gates of Rome. Imagine that. He was the richest guy. He was a very successful politician. And then somebody said, "Can you educate the new emperor?" And he's like, "Sure, I can do that." "What's his name?" "Oh, his name is Nero." You remember the guy who burned the city? That's him. So at the end of the day, he had a crisis because Nero said, "You have a choice. I'll kill you or you commit suicide." Because he didn't like Seneca anymore. And Seneca chose suicide over death. Why? Because it was his own decision, in his own realm. Going back to the idea of reality and expectation, Seneca says we have to plan for things twice. First, we create it in our mind, and then we do it. And this is one important issue, I think, with respect to dealing with crisis. Go through the crisis that is potentially there and think it through to the end. I'll give you an example. My wife and I started about 2005 an automotive supply company out of nothing. We were a true, genuine startup. And it turned out she was the better entrepreneur, so she became the CEO. We started working our way through this automotive food chain from very small projects to much larger projects. And our first large project was for a company some of you may know, Karman, which at the time was one of the gold standard suppliers to the large companies like Volkswagen, BMW, whatever. And we supplied a bunch of stuff for them, and they went bankrupt and they didn't pay. Now, if you don't get your main customer to pay your bills, what happens? You're a bunch of finance guys. What happens? You're dead. You're fucked. You're hosed, all right? Everything breaks down. Your entire liquidity breaks down. Your reputation in the market breaks down. You are the loser, although you are not the cause. You are not the reason why it happened. Think about that. Years of work simply get destroyed. It's almost like a bomb strikes, all right? So what did happen at the time? At the time I was reading that Seneca quote again of thinking it through, and we sat down and we discussed what happens if we lose everything. Expectation. In Germany we have a welfare system called Hartz IV, and we said maybe we have to be Hartz IV. Very rock bottom from coming out from an entrepreneurial situation. So we worked with expectation, and expectation helped us to gain courage. Courage in fighting the legal situation. And there's a specific brand of German lawyers who deal with bankruptcy. Trust me, they are not Mother Teresa's friends, okay? These guys are real heinous. And we got that fight won for several reasons. And why did we get it won? Because we were able to deal with the expectation and to get back to the reality. The reality, they didn't pay. But then they had to pay because some technical issues happened and we had a situation of power. I come back to your point here, power. And we could solve the problem because we said, if you're not going to pay us, we're not going to do this and the whole project will go down. So the idea of crisis really breaks down into reality and expectation. And please almost use a piece of paper, cut it in half, and write down what's reality and what is your expectation, what is your fear. And when you do that, you automatically get into basically the timeline of crisis. Now, this is not a Dali picture, I'm sorry. This is the timeline, so to speak, the curve of crisis, the way I have seen it. And the curve starts with denial. This cannot be true. Oh my God, this cannot happen to us. It is so unfair. It is so whatever, unjust. This cannot be true. Now, when you start with that, what's going to happen? You run into the wall because it is a reality. It happened. I remember when I got the call my mom died, the first reaction was, it can't be true. Yes, it is true. And understanding that reality strikes, and that the striking of reality is not bad or good, it is just a fact, just like this is red and this is white. It is a simple fact. Gets you out of denial. But then something happens. The bottom falls out. Shock. Shock means paralysis. Shock means we are also in a physical state of immobility. We're in a state of not being able to move, not being able to think. And now comes a very strange piece of advice. Accept shock. Do not fight shock. It is absolutely human to have shock. The question is not shock, yes, no. The question is shock, how? How long, how deep, how paralyzing? And then you Joseph drop. Imagine you are jumping off a cliff that is 200-300 meters high, and you're just falling. And you don't know what's going to be there. Is it going to be rocks? Is it going to be water? Or you're going to have some kind of soft landing? You don't know. You are rock bottom. You are in the valley of tears. And tears are okay. And I say this for all those guys, males like me, who are fact-driven, big guys who are quote-unquote never emotional. That's all bullshit. Be emotional. Allow your tears. I call tears the water of the soul. And if we allow tears, we become honest. The valley of tears is a necessity. It is also a cleansing. It gets all these emotions visible, and more importantly, it gets these emotions out there. You can communicate with your own feelings. One of my experiences with the death of the suicide of my mother was I could not for a long time, which was more than a year and a half, communicate with my feelings. Every time somebody brought the issue up, it was as if somebody was choking me. I couldn't speak. I had breathing problems. Literally, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. So the valley of tears is yes, rock bottom, yes, painful. Call it a shithole, but it's a very helpful one. Why? Because tears are honest. Don't squeeze your tears. Allow them to flow. And then we have, as humans, a great ability. And we should cherish that ability. We have the ability of a new perspective. I'm looking at you guys right now, and I see you like this. This is my perspective prior to the situation. And then I move and I change and I have a new answer. I have a new perspective. You're still the same people. You're still the same situation. However, I am free to choose my view. This is precisely what you also said in the last talk. So that freedom of decision, of your own view, becomes critical in the fourth step, which is a give and take. You have grief, sure. If it's not grief, it's not a crisis. Simple as that. But you're also, and this is the big changing moment, enabled to search and negotiate. And who are you negotiating with? What do you think? Who are you negotiating with? With yourself. And that's the toughest negotiation you have. These are questions like, I'm a failure. I screwed it up. I had wrong judgment. Did I do something wrong? Example, suicide of my mother. Was I a bad son? Should I have not done this? Should I not have had that argument? I mean, a million things just flash at you. It's a nightmare, okay? Go through the negotiation. Understand it is not only relevant, it is a survival issue. The ability to negotiate with yourself creates the basis, the platform, to talk to other people about crisis. We had that with the insolvency talk. Step forward. Be open about what happened. Negotiate with yourself, and then in the next step be able to negotiate with others. And if that negotiation goes up and down and takes turns and goes into some sort of weird spin, so what? After all, we're dealing with crisis. We're not dealing with trouble, right? We can accept that because we know at the end of the road, if we persistently negotiate, And we allow grief, but we don't allow grief to take over. We allow grief to descend gradually, asymptotically, so to speak. Okay? Then eventually we'll find new answers. And at the end of the day, life is only about answers. And answers you only get when you ask the right questions. If you ask the wrong questions, you will get the wrong answers. And the right question in a crisis means stepping back in the first step. And I'm going to show you this. By the way, you can have the charts. I'm sure, John, you can distribute them. I'm more than happy to give you that. You don't have to take pictures. All right, let's go. Please don't. So, in conclusion, 5 thoughts, how to deal with a crisis. Why 5 thoughts? Because I have 5 fingers and it's easy to remember. You're laughing, but it has a meaning, you know? You're not going to lose, hopefully, those 5 fingers. You probably lose the charts. And you can remember, this guy said something about 5 fingers. So I'm going to do something about 5 issues. Now, what are they? Get a grip. Big issue. Frame it. Okay? Frame it means what is part of the crisis, what is not part of the crisis. Just like you frame a picture, you say what happened, why, and how, but don't get stuck in the why. And don't get stuck in this, oh, it's your fault, or it's his fault, or she did this, or the circumstances did this, the Pope is guilty, Trump is guilty, whoever, bullshit. Doesn't matter. All right? So, what happened and how are we going to talk about it? And differentiate. Very important. Differentiate. What are facts and what are emotions? When I speak about the suicide of my mother, I'll tell you in a minute why I use this example. There are certain facts, but the emotions are much bigger, much more dominant. They are the true weight in the backpack of life, all right? So we have to deal with these emotions. And emotions can be both. They can be rocks that just squeeze you to the ground, or they can become strength. Everything that is strength at the end of the day is about emotion. Even physical strength, because if you don't go to the gym, which is an emotional decision, you're not going to be strong, right? So inner strength means overcoming fear. Fear and shame, I think, are the 2 biggest rocks in our biographical backpack. And they're not good or bad, they're just a fact. And there is good fear, and there is good shame, and there is bad fear, and there is bad shame. I think it is not a smart idea to take a walk at 3 a.m. in the morning with a black suit on the left lane of the Autobahn. I wouldn't advise that. That's good fear. Bad fear is, I'm stupid, I can't do it, because my mother said it, my mother-in-law said it, whoever said it, all right? That's bullshit. No. Bad shame. Because somebody has a clue or a vision of shame and superimposes it on you. That's not your shame. Have your own shame. Understand your own shame. And understand also what is not shameful. Be clear on that. And when you build inner strength, you should be strong enough and courageous enough, which also means overcoming fear, to look for others. Others who have had similar situations. Others who have answers. You probably don't have to reinvent the answer because they have answers. And now I get to the point where I use my mom's suicide. Because a couple of years after her suicide, I got a call by the health authorities of Frankfurt. We live just around the corner here. And they asked me, Mr. Kohl, are you interested or are you willing to join a panel discussion on suicide? That's kind of a weird request, right? And I'm like, let me think about it. And I called them back and I said, I want to meet you guys first. I met them, I liked them, I said yes. And then I said another thing. I said, I just don't want to do one panel. Do you have a job for me? And they said, sure, we'll make you an ambassador. There's an initiative here in the Frankfurt area about suicide prevention. I've made suicide prevention my cause because of my mom's experience or my personal experience. And suddenly the pain, the shame, the fear has become something else because I turned pain, shame, and fear into meaning, which is precisely what we heard before. So suddenly the negotiation became a reality. The new answer is, I am going on public talks in mental institutions, and I always call that meeting the market. Because the 300 people sitting there, quote unquote, patients, and of these 300 people, 250 had suicide attempts. I mean, it doesn't get better, right? It's really in the market. And we talk about suicide, we talk about suicide prevention, and we've helped saving lives. And at the end of such meetings, I have a little ritual. I stand up, I ask everybody to stand up, and I say, tonight, I've been here, not by myself, but I've been here with my mom, who committed suicide on July 5th, 2001, in my room, in my bed. And we together are now campaigning for life. And that's why it feels good to be here, and I thank these people that I have the opportunity to do this and to turn old pain into new meaning and into new strength. And they support me before I even can support them. And that gives me, like a little battery, a whole chunk of power. Develop a clear goal, very important. If you are in a crisis and you're in a negotiation process, unless you know where you're heading, you're lost. Great example, we have a map. And this is the map of Munich. But somehow we are downtown Hamburg. And we have a map and we cannot find a single street. Because we have the map of Munich and we are in Hamburg. So getting the right frame, which could be a map, building strength, all these things don't work unless we have a clear goal, which is to have the right map for the right place, which means to act decisive, to act wise, and to act enduring. Let's go through these three words. Decisive means you make a decision and you stick to it unless somebody has really good thoughts, really good arguments to say, listen, Walter, don't do it. This is not going to be the right thing for you to do. But little talk, blah, blah talk, little headwind is not going to stop you. Certainly not. What's wisdom? What's wise? Wise also means endurance, and it means the ability to look beyond your realm of comfort, your comfort zone. Wise people, and I know some very wise people, I'm blessed with that, always have the opportunity to stand up and get out of the situation and also look at the situation from the outside. And there's two questions I can give to you as an idea how to do that practically. A crisis happens, and you're asking yourself what to do. How do I act wisely? And one question I want to give you is, would you do the same thing 10 years in the future? So let's say the crisis is now, November 2018. Would you do the same thing 2028 again? And the second thing I like to use in my seminars is what I call the movie theater trick. Imagine you're in a movie theater, but you're not in the theater, you're actually on the screen, you're in the film, you're in the crisis. Now step out of the crisis, okay? And I call that get into row 8, seat number 15. Really get some distance to the crisis. Look at it from the other perspective of the spectator. Even taking it one step further, pretend you're a friend. So one thing we do, we sit next to each other across the table, and I put a third chair, and I say, move to the third chair. What's the name of your best friend? Jack. All right, you are Jack. What are you advising to yourself? Okay, get out of yourself. That makes you wise. And endurance is something you cannot learn from a book. Endurance is something that you simply have to practice. And that means taking pain. And very typically also taking uncertainty. We're all so bloody brain-minded. God, we're so smart, you know? Children of enlightenment, haha. But what's our biggest issue? Our biggest issue is to take uncertainty. If you really want to torture people, keep them in uncertainty. And the end of a crisis or the middle of the crisis, that negotiation bit, that is uncertainty. So how do we deal with uncertainty? Depends on the situation. But if you take yourself out of the situation, obviously life becomes easier. Finally, in closing, a crisis is also an opportunity. Tell you what, when we had that crisis with the automotive supply company, BMW, which is the mother company of Rolls-Royce, stepped in, and their first reaction was, oh my God, they got this stuff from Korea, can't be any quality. And then, for the first time, they were looking at our product. We never had the opportunity to present this to BMW because we're just a small fish in a large pond, okay? And suddenly they realized, hey, this is good stuff. So hadn't it been for the insolvency of our customer, the customer of the customer, BMW, would have never looked at our work and would have never decided, oh, you can become a direct supplier, which is kind of the gold standard in the German automotive industry. It only took half a year, a lot of pain, many sleepless nights, and my first gray hair. Then I had hair, okay? So I'm one step further down the road. And hey, shit happens, as Forrest Gump says. But that was the opportunity in the crisis. If you take the situation with the suicide of my mother, two things happened. Number one, I can do my work in suicide prevention. And number two, I can stand in front of people I don't even know, talk about my mother, talk about that big crisis, one of the biggest crises in my life, and hopefully even deliver some value for you. So my final closing thought is, yes, we have crisis. There is such a thing as a DNA of a crisis, more or less, and if we prepare for it, we are open for the good stuff, the many good things we can do in our lives, which have been said in the TED Talks before. And I want to close with that thought, give you all the optimism you can have, and the knowledge that a crisis is a crisis, but usually life goes on. Thank you.